If you're a mom who's ready to start developing a connected family and restored community, join us in the Restoration Home community. We only open a few times a year and we're open now. We are working on habits of virtue this year in our families. We will have a special retreat to look forward to celebrate our progress. And each week, you get an amazing lesson full of ideas for developing virtue in your family and for creating a more hopeful and peaceful home. We only open a few times a year, like I said. So join us today at restorationhomecommunity.com. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about the peaceful path to connected families and restored communities. Today on the show, I'm going to be talking a little bit about high school. We've been on a theme of virtue this year. The first month was all about restoration, and we welcomed many new members into the Restoration Home community. And the community is closed right now, but I want to talk a little bit about preparing our young people to be free, responsible, loving adults. And this really starts with the Peaceful Press curriculum. When you read out loud to your children, when you connect with them over projects and nature walks and experiences, you give them a very strong foundation for success in any area of life later on. But I know some of you are like, what curriculum should I use in high school? Or what activities should we do in high school? And we can get really panicky and start to overload our children with online classes, create fractured relationships, and not really pay attention to what they're built for. I'm just going to read you this quote. I think this is by Oliver DeMille, who wrote one of the books that I really love for high school. It's called Hero Education. And he says, to prepare youth for success in entrepreneurial and free cultures, education tends to emphasize originality, creativity, breadth, depth, and leadership skills rather than rote memorization, standardized curriculum, or socialization. The latter skill set is vital in societies with strong upper classes employing the lower case, but the former is essential to free democratic nations. You know, if you read books about the founding of the American education system, a book like The Secret, or I think it's called The Underground History of American Education by John Taylor Gatto, or Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto, so many of his books, or even John Holt, kind of highlight that the American standardized education system is created to put people into factory positions. But those kinds of positions are actually being taken over by machines. And so that's not the kind of people that we want to raise. We're not out to raise people who can just score really well on a test. Although when you use the Peaceful Press curriculum and you narrate with your children, you summarize throughout your years of reading out loud, your children will be able to summarize information for a test. But that's the easy skill. The harder skills are teaching our children to be able to understand or think critically or have thoughts of their own, or even teaching our children to connect with God, have a little bit of quiet time so that they have original thoughts from the Lord. So I'm just going to talk about a few things that I have done with my high school students. I'll also post this in a blog post. But, and all, let me say this. Every single child is so different. And so what I did with some of my kids might not have been as good of a fit for others of my children. Some things that looked a little shaky for some children turned out okay. And so I think we really have to be individualized in the way we approach high school. You can't just say, oh, all children should do this path, because every single teen is made so differently and their aptitude and their interests are so different. And if you can know them well enough to help facilitate those interests or facilitate the path that's right for them, they're going to do a lot better. They're going to have less of a proclivity towards burnout than if you just try to apply a one size fits all method. So the first thing that I really still believe in is helping teens earn money. Many of my children got jobs at 14. My youngest daughter was working as a barista at 14. My One of my sons was working for a construction company at 14. The earlier they can start earning some of their own money, the better. It teaches them great skills, sort of the personal responsibility, teaches them social skills. They have the chance to learn from other mentors besides us, which I strongly believe in the high school years. So if you can find work opportunities, and I would love to see a homeschool family come up with like apprenticeships or internships. There should be so many more opportunities like this for our teens, but we are fortunate to have a construction company, a neat Christian guy employed my son, a coffee shop, small company run by a wonderful Christian family employed my daughter, and other similar opportunities throughout the years for my children. I'm so thankful for those. One of my friends, Renee Harris, she'll be speaking at the Rooted Home Conference in June. And her husband, they start helping their children earn money in their teens as well. I'll link their ministry in the show notes, but they really kind of pay attention to what their kids' interests are, help them find mentors, and then create opportunities for them to prove out what they're learning. So you can hear her speak live at the Rooted Home Conference. We'll have the tickets for that up in February or March. The second one is ease up on the academic schedule. I, generally I want my teens to be able to focus in on something that they're really interested in, focus in a little more deeply. My oldest daughter, who just graduated with a Juris Doctorate, she did speech in high school and really focused on that for a little while. And then she worked as a living history docent at a Christian camp and really focused on that. And so I didn't expect her, let me say this. I was creative with high school credits. I was creative because I don't want them to be overwhelmed with this heavy academic schedule that leaves them little time to think. And my youngest son right now is actually in a charter school program where they just throw new assignments at them all the time, and he's adjusted really well to that. But I don't know that we'll do that the whole 4 years, because it does become so intense. And this is still a homeschool program, so he's still, we're cooking together. That's one of his classes. Going fishing together. There's some really fun things mixed in there, but it's just the volume of work that comes at them. And it's interesting because I'm reading Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto right now. And he talks about how, the hidden curriculum of compulsory education. And one of the things he says is that one of their hidden curriculum is confusion. And I can completely see that because my son has a great facilitator, a Christian facilitator. They're reading Animal Farm right now. So I'm really thankful for that. We read that with The Kind Kingdom from the Peaceful Press and talked about it a few years ago, but they're reading it again. And, so processing the dangers of communism together. I love deep conversations like that. So he's got a wonderful facilitator. There's been a lot of good about it, but like he was in the same program last year with a different facilitator. And the English literature book, I tell you what, the questions were so confusing. I'm a writer. I have read a lot. I've researched a lot. And yet the questions that they had in this, standardized ninth grade English literature curriculum were so confusing, so many parts. And it resonated with me what John Taylor Gatto said, that part of the curriculum is confusion. And part of it is it's about money. Like when you have a big education system, there's a initiative for them to completely be redoing the textbooks so that they can make more money on textbooks. And so, maybe they do have to start adding in like weird sentences that don't make any coherent thought as they are, producing all this curriculum. But don't be taken in thinking that, oh, like the public schools know better how to do high school. It's not that hard to read great books with your children and talk about them, even if you haven't up to now been reading great books and talking about them. That's the best kind of education. That is the kind of education that really trained the greats. And it's interesting. I'm reading a lot of homeschool books right now as I'm researching. And my son showed me, he was checking out Marcus Aurelius. I think it was like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. It's a book by an early Roman centurion, maybe. I don't know even that much about him, but in his little first chapter, he talks about what he learned from his ancestors. From my grandfather, I learned good morals. From my father, I learned modesty and manly character. From my mother, piety and generosity. From my great grandfather, not to go to the public schools, but to have good teachers at home and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally. Now, with the Peaceful Press curriculum, you don't have to spend liberally. We are priced very affordably, and you can use that all the way through junior high. And in fact, I used the Kind Kingdom into high school with my youngest daughter because those opportunities to learn about the world, to look at maps, to read together, to discuss what we're reading and write papers on it were just so good. So the first one, let them earn money, ease up on the academic schedule, and let them focus in on things they're really interested in, and then facilitate interest-led learning. We've done music lessons. I put them in film classes. I've put my teens in, I help them do work at camps or have jobs, help them do college classes in high school, sent them to discipleship program. My youngest daughter did basically graduated a year early so she could spend a year in a ministry school. So having some kind of interest-led opportunities in high school can really help them before they're spending a lot of money on college, have a better feel for what they want to do. And it kind of can help you start to see, oh, they tried speech and debate. It was not a good fit for them. They were in a creative, a drama program. They loved that. They did some gardening with their uncle. That was a real hit for them. So as they are working on projects in high school, as you're giving them a little bit of time to pursue their own interests, you can start to see, okay, wow, this child should be in more of a internship program. This child should be in a trade school. This child should go to a Christian college. This child might need to go to the military. Like having some time to really observe your children and start doing this early on. Start doing this as you're going through the Peaceful Press curriculums. If the assignment is to, start a garden, see how they take to that. If the assignment is to create some kind of a dramatic presentation of something, see how they resonate with that. Like really start taking notes even in the elementary years on what your children love to do and what lights them up so that you can have more guidance and more insight as they're entering the adult years, because it really is hard, isn't it? I just listened to a podcast with 1000 Hours Outside, and she was talking in there about how you should never put your kids in debt to go to college. It's always a bad idea. Make them wait. But then I also was at Family Life Today last week recording a podcast, and there was two really nice young men there who are getting ready to create an audio drama, and they both went to private, one went to a public college, one went to a private college. They both were able to get internships at Campus Crusade for Christ because of those colleges they went to and because of their family connections. And so, there is not a one size fits all. For some children, the opportunities they need might involve going to a private Christian college. And I think that's part of it too. As you are facilitating interest-led learning, you also, as the parent, are able to kind of look at what people are doing and what might interest your children, the path that they took to get there. One of our favorite family podcasts is called How I Built This. And we'll link that in the show notes. But it's a fascinating podcast of all these really, really big businesses and how people who started them started out. Like there was an episode about Lonely Planet, and they were just kind of bumming around. They'd both gone to college, but they were bumming around, taking this big trip from like London to Asia by Volkswagen or something. And they get there and write a little travel, like a pamphlet basically, and start selling them in parks. And then that becomes the basis of Lonely Planet. Or the company Lush that does skincare products. He worked in a beauty salon, was early on working with formulations, even though he hadn't gotten a degree in that. And then eventually developed his company Lush. And so there's just fascinating stories out there about how people start businesses, how people are successful. So read lots of biographies with your children, listen to interesting podcasts of successful people, and just really broaden your horizons and theirs by facilitating interest-led learning in high school. And then I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I do appreciate having my children have some kind of Christian discipleship. And so that might be sending them to a formal, a YWAM or some other kind of a short-term mission experience. Your church might have some kind of a Bible school or a Christian summer camp that they could go and work at, but just having an opportunity to really develop a Christian community, especially if you're planning on sending them to a secular college. My two of my kids who've gotten college degrees, they went to a community college and they transferred to a CSU, a California State University, for their undergraduate. And that experience was okay for them because they had a really strong foundation. They'd both gone to a discipleship program. Obviously, we'd been reading the Bible out loud in our morning time for years and years and years. And so they had a strong foundation that meant that they could be inundated in sometimes not very biblical ways of thinking and still retain their own original and their own ideas. And so I think it's important to make sure you have a good foundation. And for some of you, your church might have a really good catechism program. For some of you, you've been doing something like that at home. But if your children are going to be in a secular workspace, which most of them are, or a secular college, having some kind of a strong foundation is going to be so helpful. And that starts in the home. That's why in the Peaceful Press curriculum, we read the Bible as part of our morning time. In the Peaceful Press curriculum, we read books and poetry that really highlight the existence of God, that highlight the goodness of God. Poems like Gerard Manley Hopkins and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and hope is a thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings a tune without a word and never stops at all. Some of these poems really point us to God. And so I think having that be part of your curriculum all through the years is so important. And that's one of the really powerful things about morning time. As you're doing your homeschool morning time, you're really shaping a worldview. And I wouldn't stop that just because your kids are in high school. I think there can be a temptation to say, oh, you high schoolers, you go off and do your thing, and I'm just going to do morning time with the younger kids. But instead, we try to actually adapt or expand our morning time to include the high schoolers, because high school students still need community. High school students still need connection with you as their parent. They still need eye contact. They still need hugs. They still need to have some fun with you. And so I would definitely continue having some kind of a family meeting, whether it's morning time or another situation that is similar, to really stay connected as a family and make sure you are still knowing your children even into those high school years, really experiencing life with them. And we went to Florida for this podcast recording, and we took our 16-year-old and spent a day looking for alligators, which is so incredible. When I do out of state conferences, I often take one of my daughters with me so that we can have these experiences together. And those are such bonding moments. So make sure you're having experiences and still really connecting with your teens as they go into the high school years. And then help them build a good transcript. There's a company called the Home Scholar, and they have great resources for building that transcript. And you can just fit the things that they have done in as credit. So you don't have to follow an exact like state sponsored scope and sequence in high school. You can fit the life that you are having into a good transcript if you're creative and working hard at it. A few other things to note about high school. I'm a big fan of classes for some things. I think science, biology, things that need dissection, unless you're into that, you should find a co-op or a class for that, because those kinds of things are so important for real understanding. And in our homeschool years with the Peaceful Press, we did so many projects. We, built little machines and baked things and nature journaled and, raised gardens. And so all of that really helped prepare our children for more technical science. But unless you really love that, unless you really are interested, it's important, I think, to get some kind of class or tutor so that they can do some dissection or, make a model of a cell, some of these things that you might not have done in your earlier homeschool years. Another one would be getting some math help. Like if that's not a strong subject for you, you don't have to try and learn all of the upper grade math subjects. You can find a good tutor or find a good math class. Those are a couple things that aren't as easy to teach in an online class. And having a math teacher who really understands and is supportive has been such an asset to my kids. A couple things I'm not sure about for high school is community college and online classes. So it really depends on your child. Some of my older kids did great in community college and high school. Some of them, it wasn't such a good fit. And it always depends on what teachers you get and on that individual child. In many states, you can go to community college in high school and get dual enrollment. So you're earning college credits while you're in high school, which makes the process of getting your degree a little faster. But it really depends on the child. So you need to know your child and also know the atmosphere of your local community college campus. And then same with online classes. Like I think teens need community, they need interaction with people. And it's already such a struggle, say amen with me, to keep our teens off of devices, to keep them in the real world and experiencing the real world. And so if you need to outsource a class, try to find some kind of a community class. Try to find real people to do it with so that you're not giving your teens even more time on a screen. And one of the problems is just so easy to be like, "Oh, I'm working on homework," and they're actually playing a video game or something. So kind of be aware of that. And just, going back to the most important thing is connection. Our teens are going to do so much better mentally, physically, spiritually if they have connection with real people. And so, make sure that you're still giving them eye contact, that you're still paying attention to them, that you're still really knowing them and fighting for connection. We still read the Bible together as a family, even though my kids are all in the later teen years. We still go on field trips together. We still have family dinners. Like we fight for connection in our family so that we can really have healthy emotional, spiritual, and physical lives instead of just kind of giving our teens over to what is the easiest. Have you a question about homeschooling in high school? You can send us a message at hello@thepeacefulpress.com. I don't necessarily recommend a curriculum for homeschooling in high school. There are some that we used earlier with our students, but the book that I would recommend is Hero Education by Oliver DeMille. It's just a great resource for understanding the power of a tutor-led education. Basically, you or a wonderful mentor reading books with your teens, talking about them, and then having a great resource for math and science. And if you do those things, your kids are going to be so set up for college. It wasn't a problem for my kids to transition into being able to handle college classes because we had done a lot of narrating, a lot of writing. We read so many books, their vocabulary was wide. And, a lot of that was due to our homeschooling with the Peaceful Press. When you read this wide variety of books together, your children are going to have an excellent vocabulary that helps them score better on the SAT. They're going to have understanding and insight. They're going to have stories and also be able to formulate stories. So much of like the college acceptance essay or doing well in college classes requires being able to read information and summarize it. And the more creative, the better your critical thinking skills, the better you're going to do in upper education. And so don't just get scared in high school and abandon sort of a living education that you developed through the Peaceful Press in the earlier years. Keep going with it. And if you are a mom of a younger child and you'd like to get to know this living education, you can use code restoration10 for 10% off my course, The Peaceful Path to a Living Education, as well as 10% off any curriculum in the Peaceful Press store. So if you haven't used any of our resources, we recommend starting with the Playful Pioneers. It's 30 weeks of living education using the Little House on the Prairie books. It's so much fun to read these stories and then read about history that was happening in the United States and North America during that same time. There are projects, there's art, there's nature study, narration assignments. It's a wonderful year of learning for elementary students and you can use code restoration10 for 10% off the already affordable bundle, The Playful Pioneers. Thanks for joining today. We appreciate you listening. Subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen.